everyone. Welcome back to The Victim's Voice. I'm your host, Lorelei. The case we are covering today happened in October of 2021, and the 5-day trial finished up in December of 2024. This case happened right around the same time as the Gabby Petito case, so this one seemed to be put on the back burner of most major media outlets. This case, however, is eerily similar to Gabby's case in many ways. Emily and Joseph Ferlazzo were van lifers, like Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. They went on a trip to celebrate their 1-year anniversary, and the night that they arrived, Joseph killed Emily, then lived inside the van with her body for days, eventually dismembering her. He admitted what he did to police, but then later on tried to say it was self-defense and pled not guilty. We are going to dive deep into the case and look at the beginning of the relationship all the way to that horrific day in October of 2021. At the time her life was tragically taken, Emily Jean Schwartz Ferlazzo was 22 years old and looked forward to what life had in store for her. She was born on July 25th, 1999, in Plymouth, New Hampshire. She was a beautiful, caring, and smart little girl who grew up to be a beautiful, caring, and smart woman who also had a kick ass voice. This girl could sing. I will post a clip on the Victim's Voice Facebook page of Emily singing. People that knew her said she would have had no problem winning on a show like American Idol or The Voice. She had an infectious personality that made everyone who came in contact with her feel important and loved. She truly cared about people and gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. She tried to see the best in everybody, which is a great quality to have, but it also leaves room for people with nefarious intentions to take advantage of someone, like Emily, who is so caring of people, even people with troubled past, and wants to believe that they have changed and look for the best in them. Emily loved anything that was bright and sparkly. The things that made Emily happy were shopping at the mall, turtles, her cat Oreo, and her dog Remy. She always made time to hang out with her best friend Lauren, which typically involved bikinis in the summer at Hampton Beach. She loved to go on adventures like camping, trips to Acadia, hiking, and rock climbing with her family and friends. Her favorite thing to do in her spare time was to dress up and volunteer at the New Hampshire Renaissance Fair. During her school years, Emily was an avid participant in cross country and track and field. After graduating from Concord High School, Emily went on to earn her LNA license, or Licensed Nursing Assistant. She was very proud of this accomplishment and found much joy in caring for others. Emily's dream, however, was to become a cosmetologist. She wanted to help people with their self-images, something she herself struggled with from time to time. Even in her darkest moments, Emily's hope and determination to survive shone brightly. She always persevered and fought for what was right, and Emily knew no matter where she was in life, she could always come back home to her mom, Adrienne, who was her biggest supporter. In 2018, Emily's best friend Lauren was a piercing apprentice at a tattoo shop. When the time came for her to start giving piercings, she was nervous. So the owner of the shop, 38-year-old Joseph Ferlazzo, told her to bring in some of her friends to practice on. One of those friends was 19-year-old Emily. Emily and Joseph felt a connection to each other immediately. He said there was something magnetic between them, a sort of euphoria, if you will. After Lauren finished Emily's piercing and she had left, Joseph told Lauren that he felt like Emily could be his next ex-wife. How charming. Sounds like a real catch. But Joseph ended up moving away to Maine, and both he and Emily went on with their lives. Until the spring of 2020, when Joseph moved back to Vermont. Upon returning, he gave Lauren a call. He wanted to see how she was doing with tattooing and piercing, and also asked if she wanted to hang out. Lori met up with Joseph and brought Emily along with her. Emily asked him to give her a tattoo, which he happily did. The whole time he was tatting her, Emily was flirting with him, at least according to what he says. He took the opportunity to ask Emily if she wanted to go on a motorcycle ride that evening, and Emily said yes. After that ride, Emily and Joseph were inseparable. They saw each other, or at least talked to each other, every day. At this point, Emily lived in New Hampshire with her parents, and 40-year-old Joseph, who said he wasn't established at the time, was couch hopping in Vermont, mostly with his friend Sarah or his friend Spence. Emily still got to see Joseph often when she came to Vermont and stayed with friends or got a hotel room, which Joseph was thrilled with since it meant he got to sleep in an actual bed during those times. Their age difference raised a lot of eyebrows between their friends and family, but to Emily and Joseph, age was just a number. They were madly in love, and nothing anyone said could stand in their way of being together. After seeing each other for a couple of months, Emily and Joseph decided they wanted to get a place together. So she decided to apartment hunt and eventually found them an apartment in Essex, which they moved into at the end of that summer. Emily was the main breadwinner out of the two. Shocker, right? She worked long hours as an LNA at the University of Vermont. While she was doing that, Joseph was doing his tattooing out of the spare bedroom of their apartment. In September, about a month after moving in together, Emily decided to propose to Joseph in a cute Emily kind of way. She gave him a card that said, "Will you marry me? Check yes or no." Of course, Joseph checked yes, and just like their relationship had been moving at a fast pace from the start, so did their marriage, which happened the very next month, October 10th, 2020. They got married on a dock with just Emily's friend Lauren and Joseph's friend Teresa. Emily and Joseph's relationship was like a fairy tale at first, a love at first sight, them against the world kind of thing. But it wasn't long after they got married that things started taking a turn for the worse in their relationship. Emily had gotten a job at a hospital as an LNA, but Joseph continued to carry on like he did before they had met and moved in together. He was no longer sleeping on friends' couches, but he still didn't work, other than the tattoos that he did in the spare room of their apartment, where he said that Emily demanded to have a camera to watch what he was doing. But the main issue in their marriage was that Joseph claimed that when they met, he had been polyamorous. He claimed Emily knew this, but had asked him to be monogamous. He said that he compromised with her and that he would be monogamous with a polyamorous clause. This meant, according to Joseph, he would be monogamous until that ran its course, and then they would go on to a polyamorous relationship. He believed that monogamy would only last so long, and then they would both find another person that they were interested in. Some people get polygamy and polyamorous confused with each other. The main difference between them is marriage. Polygamy is a person being married to more than one person, while polyamorous is having multiple romantic sexual partners. Emily was totally against the idea of having to share Joseph with anyone else, nor was she interested in being involved with anyone else herself. Joseph said he had told Emily that he couldn't promise that he could stay monogamous forever. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being polyamorous, as long as the couple is in agreement with it and all of its conditions. It's not okay when a 38-year-old man tries to make a 19-year-old girl be involved in something that she doesn't want to be involved in. If Joseph was already in a polyamorous relationships before he got together with Emily, and that's what he wanted to continue to be in, then that should have been one of the first things that he and Emily talked about when getting to know each other. Although they didn't take much time to get to know each other. They started dating in August and were married by October. But there was still 2 months where he could have found time to talk about it. I believe he knew she wouldn't want any part in it, and he was scared that if he mentioned it, he would lose her. So he waited until after they were married. Though Joseph told Emily he would stay monogamous for a while, he still stayed in contact with people that he was in past relationships with, and even former quote unquote fuck buddies, all of which he tried to hide from Emily, which proves he knew what he was doing wasn't acceptable since he was not just in a relationship, but now married. During his trial, Joseph tried to turn everything around on Emily, saying that she became insecure and controlling, that she would question him about who he was talking to and where he would go. She would also go through his phone on a daily basis to check and see who he had been talking to or interacting with. Maybe he shouldn't have secretly been talking to past hookups, and Emily wouldn't have felt quite so insecure. Then this man had the audacity to claim that at first it was just verbal, but that eventually Emily became physically abusive to him. He said she would scream and accuse him of things. Then she would punch him, slap him, and throw objects at him. She didn't want him to be friends with any of the women he had been friends with for years. Joseph said that he had been in abusive relationships before where he had been the one getting abused and had learned to just tolerate the abuse as to not escalate the situation. He stated that most of the women in his life in the past had been aggressive or abusive to him, if you will. Maybe, Joseph, it's the fact that you do things behind their backs, like talk to previous fuck buddies, then act like they're crazy when they confront you with it. Maybe you gaslight them and act like they're imagining everything until they actually think that they are the crazy one. When it came to who was abusing who, Emily's mom, Adrienne, told a completely different story. She had seen Joseph get physical with Emily on more than one occasion. Joseph also said during the trial that he suggested that they go to a therapist, which they did. He actually said that the therapist recommended that they have pillow fights to keep them from being physical with each other. I'm sorry, what therapist would recommend that a couple hit each other when there was supposedly domestic violence already happening? This guy is off his rocker. Then, this fucking scum of the earth had the audacity to say that he had thought about divorcing Emily several times because she wasn't financially responsible. This 41-year-old man who was a freelance tattoo artist who was couch surfing until he met Emily was saying that Emily, who was 22 years old and a nursing assistant who worked full time and got them an apartment, should have been more financially responsible. This guy is unbelievable. The truth was, Joseph was a piece of shit who loved to manipulate people and play the victim. And it wasn't long before Emily got sick of his bullshit. She moved back to New Hampshire and stayed with her parents in April of 2021. But a few months later, in September, Joseph came crawling back, asking Emily to forgive him and to give him another chance. So she did. Emily wanted to see the good in everyone and give everyone the benefit of the doubt, especially her husband. But this would prove to be the deadliest choice she would ever make. While staying on Emily's parents' property, Joseph and Emily bought a small school bus that they were fixing up to live and travel in. They named the bus Roman Rosie. Joseph and Emily's first wedding anniversary was on October 10th of 2021. They made plans for the weekend of the 15th to not only celebrate their anniversary, but to also visit with Joseph's sister Nikki, whom Emily had yet to meet. A family reunion, as Joseph called it. Emily was excited to get away, enjoy the autumn air and scenery, and to finally get to meet Nikki. So on Friday the 15th, Joseph, Emily, and their dog Remington left in their renovated camper bus and headed to Bolton Valley, Vermont, a rural area near the Canadian border. When Joseph and Emily arrived at Bolton Valley, they parked Rosie in the parking lot of the Bear Run condos, where Nikki and her boyfriend had rented an Airbnb. They met out in the parking lot, and according to witnesses, Emily seemed happy and excited. At 8:13 p.m., Emily sent her last message through Facebook Messenger to her father to let him know that they had arrived safely. No one would ever see or hear from Emily again. At 9:39 p.m., Joseph sent his sister a message that said, quote, "Hey, we're going to take it the night to rest. You still drink coffee? We'll see you tomorrow morning," end quote. They had planned to hang out in the Airbnb with Nikki and her boyfriend to watch Netflix and catch up a little, But for some reason, Joseph and Emily decided to stay in the bus. No one would see Emily the rest of the weekend. For the next couple of days, Joseph went around acting like nothing was wrong, even though Emily was not with him. The next morning on Saturday, October 16th, Joseph woke up, made some French pressed coffee, and texted his sister, telling her that he couldn't sleep and asked her if she wanted some coffee. She said yes, so he brought Nikki and her boyfriend some freshly brewed coffee to their Airbnb. They asked Joseph where Emily was, and he told them that she had decided to sleep in. Then he and Nikki went to have breakfast at a restaurant in nearby Waterbury, Vermont, which was only a 6-minute drive from Bolton Valley. After returning to the Airbnb after breakfast, Joseph returned to the camper van and drove to his friend Sarah's house in St. Albans, Vermont, which is north of Bolton Valley. Sarah also noticed that Emily was not with Joseph, and so she asked him where she was, to which he replied that they had gotten into an argument and so she had gone to visit some friends. Joseph left the van at Sarah's at this point and rode his motorcycle that he had stored in Sarah's garage back to the Airbnb. The rest of the day went on as normal. When Joseph got back, he gave his sister a tattoo. Then that evening, the three of them, Joseph, Nikki, and her boyfriend, went out to dinner. And once again, they asked where Emily was because at this point, they knew that she wasn't still sleeping. So Joseph told them the same story he had told Sarah, that they had gotten into an argument that morning after he got back from breakfast, and Emily had left to go visit some friends. That night, Joseph went back to Sarah's house and slept all night in the bus. The next day, Sunday, October 17th, Joseph went to brunch with Nikki and her boyfriend. Once again, Emily was nowhere to be seen. He told them that he hadn't seen her since she left after their argument. That evening, he went back to Sarah's for a bonfire. One of Sarah's friends who was there that night was a police officer. This police officer was later questioned, and she said that everything seemed normal at the bonfire. She said there was nothing off about Joseph's behavior, and there was no reason to suspect anything nefarious had taken place. Everyone, including Joseph, seemed to be in a good mood and having fun. The police officer later stated that she didn't even know that Joseph had a wife. Once again, Joseph slept in the bus that night. The couple was supposed to drive Rome and Rosie back to Emily's parents' home in New Hampshire on Monday, October 18th. But instead of doing this, Joseph grabbed his motorcycle and rode 3 hours back to New Hampshire in the middle of October. Most people wouldn't ride their motorcycle around the block in October in Vermont, in New Hampshire, because of the freezing cold temperatures. But Joseph rode for 3 hours. When Joseph arrived at Emily's parents' house at around 6 p.m. on Monday evening, they were shocked to see Joseph by himself on his motorcycle, without their daughter or the bus in sight. Of course, their first question to Joseph was, "Where's Emily?" He told them the same story he had told Sarah and Nikki, that they had gotten into an argument, but instead of Emily was going to visit friends, he told them that Emily had gotten off the bus somewhere along Route 2 and started walking. He said he drove away, then stopped at a gas station, turned around, and went back to the place where she had gotten off of the bus, but she was gone. Emily's mom asked Joseph 2 different times where the bus was. The first time he told her it was in New Haven, Vermont, getting worked on. The second time she asked, he said it was at his friend's garage. But Joseph didn't have time for all this chit-chat about Emily at the moment. He had more important things to do, like take a shower, change his clothes, and eat the dinner that Emily's stepdad had cooked earlier that evening. While Joseph was cleaning up and getting his tummy full, Emily's family called the New Hampshire police and the Vermont State Police to report Emily missing. Trooper Cody from VSP talked to Joseph on the phone while he was still at Emily's parents' house, and he told yet another story. Joseph first said that Emily had been with him and then said something about getting an Uber. He said he hadn't had contact with her since Saturday afternoon at around 12:30, when she had asked him to drop her off in a parking lot. He said she was wearing white sneakers, light colored blue jeans, and a long sleeved black shirt. The trooper asked how come he just left. Joseph said he went back but couldn't find her anywhere, so he assumed an Uber had picked her up already. The trooper had to ask Joseph twice if Emily had her cell phone with her. The first time he ignored the question, but then said yes and that he didn't have it. Joseph also told the trooper that the van was at the shop getting an inspection. When the trooper asked what shop it was at, Joseph stuttered around and said he didn't know the name of it, but then gave him a location of a random shop. Trooper Cody also asked him where he had gotten his motorcycle from, to which Joseph replied that he had been storing it at his friend Sarah's house. Trooper Cody asked for the address of Sarah, and Joseph gave it to him. He asked if Emily had any family near Bolton Valley, and Joseph said no, and told him that they had been visiting his sister. Trooper Cody told Joseph if he heard anything from Emily to let him know, and that he would be getting back with him again later on that day. Shortly after talking to Trooper Cody, Joseph left Emily's parents' home. He told them that he had work to do back in Vermont. The work that he had to do was to finish some tattoos. Yes, you heard that right. Instead of worrying about his missing wife, Joseph was worried about finishing up some tattoos. I mean, priorities, right? But Emily's parents felt something was not right with Joseph and that he might have known more than what he was letting on about Emily's disappearance. So before Joseph left their house, Emily's dad had the brilliant idea to convince him to turn on location sharing on his phone so that they could share each other's location. And Joseph, he was dumb enough to agree to do it. Now, while looking for Emily, they could also keep an eye on Joseph's movements. Joseph didn't take his motorcycle to go finish his work in Vermont. This time, he took his red Jeep Wrangler that had been sitting at Emily's parents' house. While Joseph was on his way back to Vermont, he had no idea that Trooper Cody was sending another trooper to drive by Sarah's house. Cody had a feeling that Joseph had lied about the bus being in the shop for an inspection, and his feeling was right. There was the bus sitting in Sarah's driveway. Joseph, in the meantime, arrived at his friend Spence's house in Vermont around 11:15 p.m. that night. He asked Spence to come with him to pick up the bus from Sarah's house and move it to Spence's. Joseph told him that it needed to be moved that night and could not wait until the morning. Spence thought this was odd, but Joseph was his friend and he wanted to help him out, so both men climbed in Spence's Honda Civic and headed to St. Albans to get the bus. Spence didn't know Sarah, so Joseph was giving him directions to get to her house. Spence later said that Joseph didn't seem to be himself on the drive to get the bus. He said he seemed kind of distant and lost in his own thoughts. Spence asked Joseph if there was something wrong and why he was being so quiet, but all he would say was that he wanted to get to the bus. So they sat in the car in an awkward silence, finally reaching St. Albans around midnight. As they drove down Sarah's street, they saw flashing lights and 3 or 4 squad cars around Sarah's house. There were also several officers standing near Joseph and Emily's bus. Alarm bells went off in Spence's head, so he looked over at Joseph and asked him what the hell was going on. Joseph's response was to tell Spence to drive past Sarah's house to the end of the dead-end road and turn around and go past the house again. Spence asked him again what was going on, and Joseph just sat there quietly, looking straight ahead. But Spence wasn't giving up so easily. He asked Joseph one more time what was going on and why were there police officers around his and Emily's bus. Joseph's response was that there was a lot going on and that he wished he could see his grandmother. Joseph then told him that Emily was back at the van. A knot formed in the pit of Spence's stomach when he asked the next question. Was Emily alive? Joseph looked at him with a blank look on his face and said no. Spence then asked his friend if he had hurt Emily, to which Joseph replied, Yes. Spence wanted no part of whatever Joseph had done, but at the same time was scared that Joseph might do something to him if he didn't do as he wanted. He was acting fidgety already and kept saying that he didn't want to go to prison. Spence knew he had to get Joseph out of his car. He didn't want to be involved in this shit, so he drove a little further, then stopped and knew he had to take the chance. He told him to get out of his vehicle. Joseph got out of Spence's car without saying a word and started walking down Route 36. Immediately, Spence called 911 and reported everything Joseph had said, including the part about Emily being deceased in the bus. Dispatch relayed this information to the officers that were on the scene at Sarah's house. Because of this new info, officers were allowed to enter the van to do a protective sweep in case Emily was injured or needed help. As the officers entered the bus, they noticed that although it did look lived in, there wasn't any sign of a struggle or that a fight had taken place. There wasn't anything broken or knocked over. It was a little cluttered, but that was it. The officers let out a sigh of relief, thinking that whoever had made that call to 911 had been wrong, that Emily wasn't inside the camper deceased. However, it was then that one of the officers went and opened the bathroom door. On the floor of the shower were several black trash bags, stacked on top of each other. The officers couldn't immediately see what was inside as they had all been shut tightly with knots. One of the officers lifted the bag on top to make sure Emily wasn't underneath the bags. He later stated that the bag seemed very light. He opened the bag and found pillows and sheets. They opened one of the other bags, and the smell was so overpowering that the officer almost vomited. Inside the bag, he made a gruesome discovery. There were body parts. Someone had been dismembered. In fact, 5 of the 8 bags contained body parts. They wouldn't know for sure who it was until the medical examiner did an autopsy. But with everything they already knew, they could only assume it was Emily. The vehicle was then towed to the St. Albans State Police Barracks as evidence. A detective from the Major Crimes Unit, Sergeant Voris, had been trying to locate Emily initially through her Facebook account and her and Joseph's cell phone data. Emily's phone had last pinged near the place that she and Joseph had been staying in Bolton Valley, and her Facebook had last updated at 10:14 p.m. on Friday, October 15th. Forrest also responded to the St. Albans barracks that night, since there was a chance that Emily had been murdered, and this would now go from being a missing person to being a homicide. While all of this was going on, other members of the Vermont State Police were looking for Joseph. They were searching on and around Highway 34, the area where Spence had kicked Joseph out of the car. On the afternoon of Tuesday, October 19th, around 14 hours after the 911 call had taken place, Detective Sergeant Nolan located him. Nolan had stopped at a Maples Fields gas station to get lunch, and it just so happened that Joseph was also there, buying himself a drink. He must have been parched after his long 14-hour walk. At 2 p.m. that day, he was brought to the St. Albans State Police Barracks and put into an interview room where he sat and waited for Detective Voris to arrive. When Voris arrived, he read Joseph his Miranda rights and asked him if he wanted to talk. Joseph said yes, but that he was hungry and cold. So the baby boy was given a donut and a blankie, and that's when he spilled his guts. He said he was sure that they had already talked to his friend Spence, so there was no use beating around the bush. That's when he immediately, within 1 minute, started telling Voris his version of what had happened. And this is only Joseph's version. He said that when they arrived that Friday in Bolton Valley, Emily had become berserk and psychotic, so he had shot her twice in the head. According to Joseph, tensions were running high as soon as they settled into the bus that Friday evening. He said that both he and Emily were drinking vodka and Red Bull, and that she had become hostile for no reason. She was lying on the couch in the bus and started complaining that the candles that Joseph had lit were too bright. Emily started saying hurtful things to Joseph and talking about a dilemma that she had. What this dilemma was, no one knows, but it sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me. She then showed Joseph a long note that she had typed out on the Notes app on her phone. Joseph began to read it, but then Emily deleted it before he could finish, saying that she just didn't want to talk about it right then. Joseph said he was confused and felt uneasy about this. He said that he told Emily that if she didn't want to be there, then don't, that she was free to leave if she was that unhappy. But was she, though? Joseph said that's when Emily started throwing an absolute fit and was cursing and yelling at him. Of course, Joseph didn't yell or curse back. He stated that he was on vacation and was going to enjoy it, whether Emily did or not. So he turned on music, got himself another drink, and danced away the evening with Remy, their dog. But this didn't help anything when it came to Emily. I'm sorry, but this makes no sense at all to me. Emily becomes mean and aggressive and completely pissed off over some candles and some dilemma she is supposedly having that she mentions right as their vacation is starting, but then doesn't want to say what it is. All of this after everyone said she was so happy and excited to be there. But once again, sweet little Joseph doesn't argue back, but instead turns on some music and starts dancing with the dog. I don't believe any of this crap for a second. Joseph said after this, things escalated even more, and as he was blowing out the candles, which should have made Emily happy if she didn't want them lit in the first place, she suddenly grabbed one of them and started hitting Joseph in the neck, arm, and maybe his chest, though he can't remember exactly. And if this is true, I don't blame Emily at all. She is pissed off, most likely at something Joseph did or said, and he wants to act like her feelings don't matter. Instead of acknowledging whatever had happened, he wanted to dance around the camper like a dumbass. Joseph then says that he managed to wrestle the candle away from Emily and put it back on the counter. However, the violence didn't stop. Emily then started hitting and kicking him. During this, she even kicked Remy. He said that he eventually was able to restrain Emily by holding her arms down and told her, "We're not your punching bag." Joseph said at this point he wanted to put some space between himself and Emily, so he took Remy out for a walk. But when he came back, things were still the same, and the fighting continued where it had left off. Emily told Joseph to fuck off and then elbowed him in his genitals. Now remember, this is all according to Joseph. Joseph said that he didn't say anything at all when Emily told him to fuck off. But when she elbowed him in the genitals, he did say something. Now, most people would yell or cuss when they get hit in their private parts, but not Joseph. His response was to yell, "No more hitting," while hitting her with a throw pillow. I guess that therapy really paid off. Eventually, things calmed down, or so it seemed. They stopped fighting, and Emily laid down in the bed and started scrolling through her phone. But now, Joe Cool was sitting on the couch and he was stewing. After about 10 minutes went by, he got up, went to the closet, and grabbed his Glock. And then he jumped on top of Emily. He put a throw pillow over her head and shot her twice. Then Joseph proceeds to yell and curse at Emily's lifeless body, saying, "Are you fucking kidding me? And why in the hell would you do that?" Why would she do what? She is the one that got shot twice in the head while lying in bed scrolling through her phone. He then shut off her phone. When the detectives asked why, he said that she wasn't going to need it anymore. Joseph then picked up Emily and put a trash bag over her head so blood wouldn't get everywhere. He then put her lifeless body in the shower. After all of that, Joseph went on with his life as normal the rest of the weekend. He put new linens on the bed after flipping the mattress over. He had coffee and breakfast with Nikki, went out to eat for dinner on Saturday, went to a bonfire that night, and in between all of these normal activities, He was stabbing Emily's dead body and dismembering her over a 4-day period while he still slept on the bus. Even with this confession to the police, Joseph pleaded not guilty and asked a jury to exonerate him. The audacity is flying high with this guy. Even though he admitted to killing Emily while she was lying in bed, he now wants to waste taxpayers' money on top of putting Emily's family through a trial where they're going to see and hear about all of the gruesome things that he did to their daughter. His trial would begin December 6th of 2024, and on December 11th, the fourth day of the trial, Joseph testified in his own defense. If you would like to watch this shit show, Grizzly True Crime covered the trial and has a playlist for each day. So let's talk about Joseph's testimony at the trial. His story changed once again. He was now claiming that he shot Emily in self-defense. He told the jury the same story of how the fight had started that he had told the police. The story about the candles and her hitting him with one, how he told her no hitting as he hit her with a pillow, and then he had started dancing with the dog. You know, all that bullshit. However, he changed the part about Emily lying down on the bed, playing on her phone, and minding her own business when he jumped on her and shot her for no reason. Now he says that Emily looked at him and said, "That's it, you're dead," as she reached her hand under her pillow and pulled out her gun. She then started pushing her body up and coming toward him. Joseph stood there in fear, saying, "No, no, no," but Emily just kept coming toward him. Then suddenly Joseph grabbed his gun. Meanwhile, Emily is coming closer and closer. Mind you, they are in a little bus. She must have been moving really slow if it takes her this long to reach him. This is when Joseph holds up his gun and shoots Emily twice in the head. He said he was very afraid and he knew that Emily was going to shoot him if he didn't shoot her. He said he was scared for his life. During the trial, Joseph was asked why he lied to people all weekend about where Emily was. He stuttered around for a minute, and then the answer he gave was strange. He said that his grandmother wanted to give up her home and move into assisted living. He said that he and Emily were going to go to Pennsylvania to make that process happen. He said if he had told people the truth, then the police would have been called and he would have been detained. Therefore, he wouldn't be able to help his grandmother get her life together. This was what he was worried about when he had just taken his wife's life. I mean, it's good he wanted to help his grandma, but I'm sure she could find someone else to help her besides her murderous grandson. He testified that he wanted to continue with the plans that he had, even though what happened made it impossible. He can't even say it. He says, "What happened?" like it wasn't a big deal, like a little mishap during his day. What happened was you murdered your wife, stayed with her body for 4 days, and during that 4 days, you not only stabbed her deceased body 18 times, but you also dismembered her. He was then asked a great question that we all were wondering. Why didn't he just go back to Pennsylvania to get his grandma situated instead of hanging around all weekend? He once again stuttered around as if he was thinking of an answer. He then said he took the opportunity to hang out with his sister that he hadn't seen in years. Remember, the whole time he was hanging out with the sissy, his wife was dead in the bus and eventually dismembered by this gem of a husband. When Joseph was asked if he remembered stabbing Emily, he said no. When asked if he remembered dismembering her body, he said he had one memory, and that was cutting into her leg with a knife. But he said he had to stop because it made him sick, nauseous, and vomiting. When asked if he just got sick once, he said no, that he drank and got sick multiple times, but that he didn't remember any other part of that incident. That incident? That incident was that you shot your wife twice in the head, stabbed her 18 times post-mortem, and then dismembered her. Is the jury supposed to find him not guilty because he doesn't remember the quote-unquote incident? But then I guess he got over his nausea and vomiting because he finished dismembering her and then put her body parts into 8 different trash bags. But of course, he doesn't remember any of that. The defense's argument was that he killed Emily in self defense after a fight over candles that caused Emily to go psycho, and that he didn't tell police the whole story when he was interviewed by them because he didn't remember much of the rest of the weekend, including when he stabbed and dismembered Emily. According to his attorney, he was tired and hadn't ate for days at the time of the interview, even though we know he went out to breakfast and dinner with his sister over that weekend. And when he drove to Emily's parents' house to get his Jeep, he stopped and ate a big bowl of spaghetti that Emily's dad had made. So he did eat. The prosecution's account of events sounds much more believable. That Joseph and Emily got into a fight, but it wasn't about candles. It was because Emily found out that he had brought her to the condos where his ex wife lived, took her there for their first anniversary. They then started arguing about the fact that Joseph didn't want to be monogamous, and that's when Emily told him that she was done, that she didn't want to be with him anymore. Then she rolled over and went to sleep, leaving Joseph to stew in his anger. Then he went to the closet, grabbed his gun, put a pillow over Emily's face, and shot her twice. After that, he stabbed her with 3 different knives, once in the heart, 8 times in the abdomen, and 9 times in her back. He then put her in the shower and stayed with her body all weekend until Sunday, when he dismembered her. He used a handsaw to remove Emily's head, arms, and legs. He put her body parts in 8 different trash bags and put them in the shower, where they were later found by law enforcement. It only took the jury 5 hours to find that Joseph was guilty. They rejected the second-degree murder and manslaughter charges and found him guilty of first-degree murder. Many people have wondered if Emily was Ferlazzo's only victim. Well, it looks like the answer is no. After the story came out about Emily, another girl came forward, 25-year-old Brooke Friend. According to the Burlington Free Press, Joseph Ferlazzo and Brooke Friend had gone on a few dates in 2018. On one of these dates, Joseph drugged, sexually assaulted, and threatened to kill Brooke. She reported the incident to law enforcement, but the prosecution declined to file a case because of a lack of evidence. She also tried to get a restraining order against Joseph, which would have also prevented him from being able to buy a gun, but the judge denied it. The gun he used to kill Emily was bought after this incident. Had the judge not denied the restraining order, he wouldn't have had that gun the night he killed Emily. It's Joseph's stepmother, young Helem Ferlazzo, was also murdered in October of 2009, and it has never been solved. Joseph Ferlazzo's father, Joseph Ferlazzo Sr., told police he had returned to his home from grocery shopping after midnight on the night of the murder and discovered the body of his wife in their apartment. She had been stabbed multiple times. And we know Joseph Jr. likes to stab. It seemed that Joseph Ferlazzo Sr. was into some shady things. He owned a massage parlor in Reading, Pennsylvania, that had been raided by the police in May of 2009. Police arrested multiple women on charges of prostitution, including a female relative of young Helem's, who reportedly worked as the massage parlor's manager. Law enforcement are unsure if Young He's murder is related to this business. Ferlazzo Sr. had been questioned, but the case went cold. In the wake of Emily's murder, law enforcement is now looking in to see if Ferlazzo Jr. could be involved in his stepmother's murder. On April 25, 2025, Joseph Ferlazzo was sentenced for Emily's murder. Even though the jury had found him guilty of first-degree murder, his defense attorneys asked the judge to only give him 15 years, which is what he would have gotten if the jury had only charged him with the lesser-included charge of manslaughter. They basically said, forget about what the jury said. They also said that Joseph could be rehabilitated, and if he was ever given the chance to live in the free world again, he could reinstate his tattoo business. Well, he just wants to get out of jail and pretend Emily never existed and go back to his own old life. They believed that because he had no previous charges or a previous record, that the court should be lenient on him, as if saying what he did to Emily didn't matter, as long as he had no prior convictions. He shot her twice, stabbed her body 18 times, including through the heart, then dismembered her. Isn't that enough? The prosecution, on the other hand, asked the judge to give him the maximum, which is 50 years to life, because of the fact that he wasn't remorseful and still was not taking responsibility for his actions. In fact, while incarcerated waiting to be sentenced, Joseph received a disciplinary action for hitting on a female correction officer. Apparently, he propositioned her, he called her pumpkin, and asked her for her phone number. This guy thinks he's some kind of ladies' man. The audacity is real. Also, this man had the audacity, after murdering their daughter, to try to keep Emily's mom and dad from getting Remington, the dog that he had shared with Emily. He had his friends, the Langs, hold on to Remington, stating that he had the dog for 2 months before he and Emily got married. After going through a bunch of red tape and going to court, her parents finally were able to get Remington back. But by then, her name had been changed. It doesn't surprise me that Joseph would pull that kind of shit. But shame on the Langs for putting Emily's parents through that when they were grieving the loss of their daughter. Remington was Emily's baby, and they wanted the dog to help them feel close to their daughter. How can people be so spiteful and vindictive? The prosecution also tells the court they are seeking the maximum because of the fact that he tried to have his confession thrown out and put Emily's family through a painful trial. He tried to say that the police treated him poorly during his interview, so much so that he gave a false confession. Obviously, from seeing the interrogation, it was evident that Joseph was treated with the utmost respect. The loser was given a donut and a blankie, for fuck's sake. The prosecution stated that Joseph even tried to say that it wasn't his signature on the Miranda waiver. Also, the prosecution stated to the court that they found what Joseph did on the witness stand to be appalling and an aggravating factor in the case, from making the comment that he wanted to make Emily his next ex-wife to using the term chopping it up when talking about hanging out with his friends. Yes, he did that. If you haven't seen his testimony, you have to watch it. I will share the link on my Facebook page. When he testified, he continued to lie and try to paint Emily in a bad light. He tried to say that Emily was abusive, even though it wasn't corroborated by any evidence. He tried to say that Emily agreed to a polyamorous relationship as a way to explain cheating on Emily. He knew that Emily did not ever agree to be in a polyamorous relationship. The prosecution told the court that Joseph was a predator that used his tattooing business to find young girls who are troubled. He would make them feel safe until they weren't. He met Emily when she was 20 and he was almost 40. She was working through sexual assault trauma at the time. 4 different girls who had met Joseph through tattooing when they were teenagers and he was in his 30s. They wrote character statements in his defense. He had relationships with each of them outside of tattooing them. The prosecution tells the court that Joseph had the audacity to disagree with Emily's mom's victim impact statement and actually tried to prevent her from reading it. The judge told the court that he didn't believe that Joseph could be rehabilitated and that he was a danger to society. He didn't believe that Joseph had been truthful or credible during his testimony. He said that Joseph had taken no accountability for his actions and that it wouldn't be giving Emily the justice that she deserves to only sentence him to 15 years. The judge reminds the defense that Emily is the only victim in this case. After very emotional victim impact statements from Emily's mom and dad, and a video of Emily beautifully singing the song Hallelujah, which I will post on my page. Joseph's lawyer read the character statements written on his behalf that no one cared about. She then started showing on the projector different photos of newly tattooed women's body parts. When the judge asked what he was looking at, Joseph's attorney said that he wanted the court to see some of Joseph's artwork. Seriously? You murder your wife and you want to show off your tattooing skills to the court? Or was he jealous that they showed the video of Emily singing and he felt like he wanted the court to see his talents? This guy and his attorney are something else. After they get done with show and tell, the judge hands down his sentence. Joseph is sentenced to 42 years to life, which means he won't be eligible for parole until he is about 86 years old. And still then, there is no guarantee he will even get out then. It's very unusual for a parole board to grant parole the first time there is a hearing. And because of the nature of his crime and the fact that he doesn't take accountability, it is very likely they will never grant him parole. But I mean, even if they did, he will be in his late 80s anyway. So I think it's safe to say that he will never get out and that Emily finally got justice. I hope that her parents can now find some kind of peace. For photos from this case, check out the Victim's Voice on Facebook and Instagram and come back next week for a new case. Until then, stay safe and peace out.